The Treaty of Amiens temporarily ended hostilities between the French Republic and Great Britain during the French Revolutionary Wars. It was signed in the city of Amiens on 25 March 1802, by Joseph Bonaparte and the Marquis Cornwallis as a definitive treaty of peace. The consequent Peace of Amiens lasted only 1 year and engendered the only period of peace in Europe between 1793 and 1815. Under the treaty, Britain recognized the French Republic. The British Parliament had dropped England's historical claim to the now-defunct French kingdom only 2 years previously. Together with the Treaty of La Neville, the Treaty of Amiens marked the end of the Second Coalition, which had waged war against revolutionary France since 1798. Early diplomacy. The War of the Second Coalition started well for the coalition, with successes in Egypt, Italy and Germany. After France's victories at the battles of Marengo and Hohenlinden, Austria, Russia and Naples sued for peace, with Austria eventually signing the Treaty of La Neville. Horatio Nelson's victory at the Battle of Copenhagen on 2 April 1801 halted the creation of the League of Armed Neutrality and led to a negotiated ceasefire. The French first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte, first made truce proposals to British Foreign Secretary Lord Grenville as early as 1799. Because of the hardline stance of Grenville and Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger, the distrust of Bonaparte, and obvious defects in the proposals, they were rejected out of hand. However, Pitt resigned in February 1801 over domestic issues and was replaced by the more accommodating Henry Addington. At this point, according to Schroeder, Britain was motivated by the danger of a war with Russia. Addington's Foreign Secretary, Robert Jenkinson, Lord Hawkesbury, immediately opened communications with Louis Guillaume Otto, the French commissary for prisoners of war in London, through whom Bonaparte had made his earlier proposals. Hawkesbury stated that he wanted to open discussions on terms for a peace agreement. Otto, generally under detailed instructions from Bonaparte, engaged in negotiations with Hawkesbury throughout the summer of 1801. Unhappy with the dialogue with Otto, Hawkesbury sent diplomat Anthony Merry to Paris, who opened his second line of communications with the French Foreign Minister Talleyrand. By mid-September, written negotiations had progressed to the point where Hawkesbury and Otto met to draft a preliminary agreement. On 30 September, they signed the preliminary agreement in London. It was published the next day. The terms of the preliminary agreement required Britain to restore most of the French colonial possessions it had captured since 1794, evacuate Malta and withdraw from other occupied Mediterranean ports. Malta was to be restored to the Order of St. John, whose sovereignty was to be guaranteed by one or more powers to be determined at the final peace. France was to restore Egypt to Ottoman control, withdraw from most of the Italian peninsula and agree to preserve Portuguese sovereignty. Ceylon, previously a Dutch territory, was to remain with the British, and Newfoundland fishery rights were to be restored to pre-war status. Britain was also to recognize the Seven Islands Republic established by France on islands in the Ionian Sea that are now part of Greece. Both sides were to be allowed access to the outposts on the Cape of Good Hope. In a blow to Spain, the preliminary agreement included a secret clause in which Trinidad was to remain with Britain. News of the preliminary peace was greeted in Britain with illuminations and fireworks. Peace, it was thought in Britain, would lead to the withdrawal of the income tax imposed by Pitt, a reduction of grain prices, and a revival of markets. Final negotiations. In November 1801, the Marquis Cornwallis was sent to France with plenipotentiary powers to negotiate a final agreement. The expectation among the British populace that peace was at hand put enormous pressure on Cornwallis, something Bonaparte realized and capitalized on. The French negotiators, Napoleon's brother Joseph and Talleyrand, constantly shifted their positions, leaving Cornwallis to write, "I feel it as the most unpleasant circumstance attending this unpleasant business that, after I have obtained his acquiescence on any point, I can have no confidence that it is finally settled and that he will not recede from it in our next conversation." The Dutch Batavian Republic, whose economy depended on trade that had been ruined by the war, appointed Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck, their ambassador to France, to represent him in the peace negotiations. He arrived in Amiens on the 9th of December. The Dutch role in the negotiations was marked by a lack of respect on the part of the French, who thought of them as a vanquished and conquered client whose present government owed them everything. Schimmelpenninck and Cornwallis negotiated agreements on the status of Ceylon, the Cape of Good Hope, and the indemnification of the deposed House of Orange-Nassau for its losses. However, Joseph Bonaparte did not immediately agree with their terms, presumably needing to consult with the first consul on the matter. In January 1802, Napoleon Bonaparte traveled to Lyon to accept the presidency of the Italian Republic, a nominally independent French client republic that covered northern Italy and had been established in 1797. This act violated the Treaty of Lunéville, in which Bonaparte agreed to guarantee the independence of the Italian Republic and other client republics. He also continued to support the French General Pierre Augereau's reactionary coup d'état of the 18th of September 1801 in the Batavian Republic, and its new constitution, ratified by a sham election, that brought it into closer alignment with its dominant partner. British newspaper readers followed the events, presented in strong moralizing colours. Hawkesbury wrote of Bonaparte's action at Lyons that it was a gross breach of faith, exhibiting an inclination to insult Europe. Writing from London, he informed Cornwallis that it created the greatest alarm in this country, and there are many persons who were pacifically disposed and who since this event are desirous of renewing the war. The Spanish negotiator, the Marquis de Azara, did not arrive in Amiens until early February 1802. After some preliminary negotiations, he proposed to Cornwallis that Britain and Spain make a separate agreement. Cornwallis rejected this, believing that to do so would jeopardize the more important negotiations with France. Pressure continued to mount on the British negotiators for a peace deal, in part because budget discussions were underway in Parliament, and the prospect of continued war was a significant factor. The principal sticking point in the late negotiations was the status of Malta. Bonaparte eventually proposed that the British were to withdraw within 3 months of the signing, with control passed back to a recreated Order of St. John, whose sovereignty was to be guaranteed by all of the major European powers. Left unspecified in this proposal was the means by which the order would be re-established. It had essentially dissolved upon French seizure of the island in 1798. Furthermore, none of the other powers had been consulted on the matter. On the 14th of March, London, under pressure to finalize the budget, gave Cornwallis a hard deadline. He was to return to London if he could not reach an agreement within 8 days. Following a 5-hour negotiating session that ended at 3 a.m. on the 25th of March, Cornwallis and Joseph Bonaparte signed the final agreement. Cornwallis was unhappy with the agreement, but he also worried about the ruinous consequences of renewing a bloody and hopeless war. Terms: the treaty, beyond confirming peace, friendship, and good understanding, called for these agreements: the restoration of prisoners and hostages, Britain to return the Cape Colony to the Batavian Republic, Britain to return most of its captured Dutch West Indian islands to the Batavian Republic, Britain to withdraw its forces from Egypt, the ceding to Britain of Trinidad and Ceylon, France to withdraw its forces from the Papal States and the Kingdom of Naples, the borders of French Guiana to be fixed, Malta, Gozo, and Camino to be restored to the Knights Hospitaller and to be declared neutral, the island of Minorca be returned to Spain, the House of Orange-Nassau to be compensated for its losses in the Netherlands. 2 days after signing the treaty, all 4 parties signed an addendum specifically acknowledging that the failure to use the languages of all of the signatory powers was not prejudicial and should not be viewed as setting a precedent. It also stated that the omission of any individual's titles was unintentional and also not intended to be prejudicial. The Dutch and French representatives signed a separate convention clarifying that the Batavian Republic was not to be financially responsible for the compensation paid to the House of Orange-Nassau. Preliminaries were signed in London on 1 October 1801. King George proclaimed the cessation of hostilities on 12 October. Amiens interlude. Upper-class British visitors flocked to Paris in the summer and autumn of 1802. William Herschel took the opportunity to confer with his colleagues at the Observatoire, in booths and temporary arcades in the courtyard of the Louvre. The Third French Exposition des Produits Français took place, 18 to 24 September. According to the memoirs of his private secretary Favourlet de Bourrienne, Bonaparte was, above all, delighted with the admiration the exhibition excited among the numerous foreigners who resorted to Paris during the peace. Among the visitors was Charles James Fox, who received a personal tour from Minister Chaptal within the Louvre, in addition to the display of recent works in the Salon of 1802. Visitors could see the display of Italian paintings and Roman sculptures collected from all over Italy under the stringent terms of the Treaty of Tolentino. JMW. Turner was able to fill a sketchbook from what he saw. Even the 4 Greek horses of St. Mark from Venice, which had been furtively removed in 1797, could now be viewed in an inner courtyard. William Hazlitt arrived at Paris on 16 October 1802. The Roman sculptures did not move him, but he spent most of 3 months studying and copying Italian masters in the Louvre. The English were not the only ones to profit by the halcyon lull in hostilities. From London, the Russian Simon Vorontsov noted to a correspondent, "I hear that our gentlemen are making extravagant purchases in Paris. That fool Demidov has ordered a porcelain dinner service, every plate of which costs 16 gold Louis, for those who could not get there." Helmina von Chezy collected her impressions in a series of vignettes contributed to the journal Französische Mersellen, and F. W. Blagden and John Carr were among those who brought up-to-date curious English readers, who had felt starved for unbiased accounts of a people under the influence of a political change, hitherto unparalleled. During a separation of 10 years, we have received very little account of this extraordinary people, which could be relied on, Carr noted in his preface. A number of French émigrés returned to France under the terms of relaxed restrictions upon them. French visitors also came to England. Wax artist Marie Tussaud came to London and established an exhibition similar to one she had in Paris. The balloonist André-Jacques Garnerin staged displays in London, and made a balloon flight from London to Colchester in 45 minutes. The Spanish economy, which had been badly affected by the war, began to recover with the advent of peace. Much as it had been at the start of the wars in 1793, Spain remained diplomatically caught between Britain and France. But in the period just after the signing of the Treaty of Amiens, a number of actions on the part of the French government antagonized the Spanish. France's unwillingness to block the cession of Trinidad to Britain was one of the things that irritated King Carlos IV the most. Spanish economic interests were further injured when Bonaparte sold Louisiana to the United States, whose merchants competed with those of Spain. Following that sale, Carlos wrote that he was prepared to throw off alliance with France.